Hello and welcome back to the Game Room. You know what I love? Video games. You know what I love talking about? Games. And it seems like a lot of people these days who cover games seem to hate them. Or at least the people who play them. Well, that's not me, and that's not the 1,851 of you beautiful people checking out this video here today. We are 49 subs away from 1,900. Thank you all so much. It's been another great week. Just had an amazing 49er win, and I just happened to see the new movie Godzilla Minus One. So we're doing a bit of an audible today because I really want to talk about this movie because I was genuinely surprised by my thoughts on it, and just so that we keep it in line with still it being about some games, we're going to talk about some Godzilla games as well. So if that sounds interesting to you, let's check it out. There's a lot of games out there, some of which you've never even heard of. That's where I come in. My name's Luke. I've been playing games since the age of 2, and I have no life.
This is my game room.
So right off the bat, I'm going to keep this video spoiler free, so there will be a little bit discussion of some fairly early plot points, but for the most part, I want you guys, if you want to see this movie, to go in fresh, because honestly, this is the first movie I've gone to see, and I can't remember when, that I've enjoyed this much and had a more delightful experience at the theaters. Certainly anything since COVID, and probably I would say since the mid 2010s even. Like I really can't think of anything that I enjoyed this much, especially being a foreign film that is subtitled, so there's no dubbing, and also it being a Godzilla movie of all things, which I really did not expect this at all. In fact, I brought my wife with me, who was really just going to support her husband. She had very little interest in seeing a Godzilla movie, and she was crying up a storm, really involved in the storylines and the characters, and left it kind of on par with me, saying it might be one of the greatest movies that we've ever seen. And for a Godzilla movie. Now, why was it so good? Let's get into it. First and foremost, I want you guys, if you do see this movie, to remember that this movie had a $15 million budget. So when you go in and you see these Marvel movies, these Star Wars movies, these big budget comic book movies that have $100, $200, $300 million budgets, and they look kind of meh, same thing with the television series, then you go and see Godzilla Minus One. Well, it doesn't have the greatest CGI in the world. For the most part, Godzilla in this movie is CGI. I think they do some practical effects with them as well, but they try and really pay homage to the guy in a suit days of Godzilla. And also, what makes this movie so good as far as Godzilla fans go, generally in Godzilla movies, I don't give a damn about the human characters. Ever. I've seen well over 20. I know there's close to 50 movies. There's a lot I've missed. I've seen most of the Showa era. I've seen a little of the Heisei era. Millennium era, I've seen maybe 1 or 2 movies. And then obviously the Legendary pictures, I've seen all those. And then I saw Shin Godzilla. And that's part of the reason why I've been following Godzilla Minus One for, God, over a year. I feel like I knew about this movie from back last summer even. And when I saw Shin Godzilla, it was a one-night event. I saw it with my buddy Sean, and it really was not a great movie, but it was just really nice to see a Godzilla movie in the theaters that wasn't the awful one from 1998. And I didn't see the Legendary Pictures one either. I then, after that, saw King of the Monsters. I saw Godzilla vs. Kong on streaming. But still, they were all fun, cheesy, campy movies, which is what I expect going into a Godzilla movie. So when Godzilla Minus One was getting an actual release and not just a one-day engagement, I was surprised. And then I saw from reviews and fans and people who talked about it before, I didn't even know they knew about Godzilla, saying it was a wonderful movie. And yes, it is. You really care about the humans. The movie starts off, it's a period piece that takes place right around the end of World War II for Japan. And if you know anything about Japanese history, the fact that they are so buddy-buddy with the United States after the United States bombed them, how is that possible? And this movie really fills in some of those gaps where you see it from the perspective of the Japanese everyman, not Imperial Japan, but the actual people, where they were just following orders. They didn't necessarily know what was going on. It's kind of a Japanese thing to, in that time, to hide from the people what was going on. And you see that happening in this movie where the main character, who is a kamikaze pilot, does not actually get to go through with his duty. Instead, he lands on an island that is then attacked by Godzilla, where he and another guy are the only survivors, and then that sets forward the plot. So this man returns home after the bomb is dropped, has a failed kamikaze pilot. A lot of the people in his town blame him for them losing to the Americans. And so this man goes off and he finds a woman in the marketplace who hands him a child, and then the woman disappears. And he wants to abandon the child, but he doesn't, because he has some sort of honor, some sort of guilt, and he's haunted by the demons of his past, where he let all of these other men down because he is the kamikaze pilot. And also, when he was on the island and Godzilla attacked, he was unable to take the shot in the plane. Even though he likely would have died had he done it, he carries this guilt. And it very much, from someone who's a fan of Japanese culture, it is nice to see a movie made by Japan about the end of World War II and how the effect of the nuclear bomb really hit them. And especially if you're a fan of Godzilla from the 54 movie, this movie really does touch on those themes of the despair Japan had after World War II. And then also, not just the despair, because we're now 70, 80 years later, so now you're seeing it with the grit of the Japanese people who really stood up, dusted themselves off, and made the most of what their situation was. And then suddenly, they're making the best cars, they're making the best games, they're a powerhouse society to this day. And it's nice to see how the effects of the end of World War II, someone was able to bounce back and make themselves better, when, especially as an American myself, you really see a lot of World War II, but we have the rah-rah, we succeeded, and then you don't really learn anything, versus you do see this almost modern take where you see a family that isn't a blood family, but they come together. You see instances of people being strong, yet strong, very strong female characters in their own way, very strong male characters, a real hero's journey in this. And this is why I'm talking about this in a Godzilla movie, where Godzilla is kind of incidental to this amazing story they craft. And that really is what brings this movie home. And in a way where in 2023, we're so used to seeing subverted expectations and the hero who is just pathetic and everything is stupid and he gets lectured and he makes mistakes. And then you have these brain dead. So everyone in this movie makes competent decisions. And then when things go wrong, they make competent decisions to correct it. Just like Godzilla makes competent decisions and then corrects it. It's not that, a plan went off the wire because they were just idiots. And even as far as the history goes, one of the things that our main character gets involved with is cleaning up all of the leftover mines that have been left in the Pacific post-World War II. And so they have to go and they have to sweep it with these wooden boats because the mines are magnetic. And then once they cut the tether of the mine, they then shoot it and explode it. And then this leads to Godzilla catching up with them. Later on, after the bomb has been dropped, Godzilla then picks up because he's still this power force of nature. And so did the bomb empower him? Did it make him bigger? Because early on in the movie, Godzilla is about the size of a T-Rex, and then he becomes large and gigantic. And you get a really cool scene on a boat, which there are clips of it. One of the most intense combinations of what you typically see in a Jaws movie, but then you have a giant Godzilla, and oh my god, like, I know the Meg has some moments like this, but it was so much more terrifying seeing a potential sea serpent or kraken-like creature with Godzilla. And just the amount of Godzilla movies, I tend to enjoy the campiness of him fighting the other monsters. I know that the actual good movies tend to be when he's the antagonist, and in this movie, my god, does that pay off in spades, because he is just a wrecking force to where you aren't always rooting for him because you care about the main cast so much. And it is full circle, the whole mentality of Japan fighting to the death, and then them realizing that maybe that's not the right way. Maybe they should be fighting to live. And by the end of the movie, that theme comes full circle, and it is beautiful. You have resolution with all the main characters, and you really have a phenomenal climax that once you get to the climax, it really just tapers off in such a satisfying way. The music is used masterfully. The sound design is used masterfully. When Godzilla unleashes his atomic breath, you really feel the whole all the emotion is sucked out of the theater, and then boom, it is so well done for a $15 million budget. I am in awe of what they accomplished. And by the end of the movie, you don't even really feel like you've been reading subtitles. You just feel like you've been engrossed in a phenomenal movie. And then obviously, as a young father myself, the plot line about a young father who has a little girl who he has to protect. It's about 2, and I have a little girl who's 18 months old. Definitely tugged on my heartstrings. So this is a movie that if you're not a Godzilla fan, you will like. If you're a Godzilla fan, you will love it. And even if you're just thinking this is going to be a schlocky, cheesy movie, trust me, give it a shot. And it is the greatest movie experience I've had since I can't remember. So definitely go support this film. Go show Hollywood that if you make good movies, we will come out and we will watch it. Because my goodness, this might be a one-stop shop for a Godzilla type movie. You know, we'll probably have schlock coming again, which I'm all right with. But man, what a great one-off. Oh yeah, if you're wondering what the -1 title means, the -1 is in reference to, this is post-World War II Japan, where they've already been bombed, and now they're getting hit by the bomb that is Godzilla. So that's like, we're at 0 already, we're going to -1. So it's not some crazy subtext behind it, but yeah, that's what it means. All right, so that's on the movie. Loved it. That 10 out of 10. I give it movie of the year, best movie I've seen, and I can't remember. So please check this movie out. See it in IMAX. See it in the biggest screen you can. I want to go see it again. Honestly, I want to go see it again, and it's surprisingly emotional for a freaking monster movie, and terrifying too. There's a few scenes that are legit scary, and just for it being $15 million. Unbelievable how good it is. You know, we get stuff like this, we get stuff like Squid Game that are genuinely good. It is really fascinating and cool to see this happening. Alright, so this briefly to go through my Godzilla games. So I've spoken about all of these separately. Let's start with the best of the bunch, in my opinion, which is Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee for the GameCube. That's such a phenomenal game. It really finally scratched that itch of a Godzilla game that I wanted. It has that King of the Monsters vibe where you're in a big battle arena, but you can have up to 4 different players. All of the important monsters from Godzilla are here. You got Mechagodzilla, you got King Ghidorah, all the Gygas, all the various other ones, and then even ones that I wasn't familiar with because I haven't seen the Millennium movies like Destroya and things of that nature. It's basically a fighting game, so I'm not a huge fighting game fan, but I am a huge fan of this game. It's a great multiplayer game for the GameCube as well. I don't think it came out for anything else, and it's just surprisingly competent. Like I said, surprisingly competent, because up until this point, all the Godzilla games I've tried had been a disappointment. And let's start off with the first one of those, which was the NES Godzilla, which is still an NES hated gems I've yet to do covering this game. So in this, you can play as Godzilla or you can play as Mothra. It's a side-scrolling game. You're trying to get to the end of this grid-based place to then fight off the monsters and then beat the map and move on to the next map. And I've never beaten it. There's a code where you can get onto a map with all the different monsters, and I've never really understood. It's super hard. It really feels like there's no way to replenish Godzilla's life. At a certain point, you just start dying. Mothra is pretty worthless in my opinion. But as far as it being a side-scrolling NES game, it is fun. It is fun to come back to. It has secret codes to it that allow you to have more enjoyment playing it too. And after Godzilla Monsters Melee, it is my favorite Godzilla game. Now, the other 2 games I have in my collection, I have not put much time into, and they also aren't very good. So we have Super Godzilla on the SNES. This was one I didn't even know existed. I found out about it years later, and honestly, I'm glad I didn't know it existed, because it's really not good. It kind of combines you play as Godzilla again, and you have a weird perspective where you're walking through a town, and then you get into a side-scrolling, almost one-on-one fight with the different monsters. Defeat them, then move on. I've tried playing it, and I think I barely even got to the first fight, and then got myself destroyed. So, interesting concept, just, I feel like all these built up to then what you got in Destroy All Monsters Melee, which is just a phenomenal game. And then the other game I wasn't even aware of, which I've talked about in my sequels video, was Godzilla 2. And other than having this badass box art cover, is very, very... You're not playing as Godzilla, you're playing as the humans, which once again you don't really want to do. and you are essentially, it's a tactical game, almost like a strategy game, where you're fighting off Godzilla and having to be as the tanks and all this, but it's very slow paced, and it's very, maybe if it wasn't a Godzilla game, I wouldn't be so harsh on it, but it is hard to pick up a Godzilla game and not be Godzilla. Now, there are other games I could have talked about, like Rampage, obviously a Godzilla-like with Lizzie, or King of the Monsters, and the guy on the cover kind of looks like Godzilla. But those are the ones I have in my collection. One last Godzilla game I'll talk about is the 2014 Godzilla for the PS4, which I stupidly did not pick up, and now it is ridiculously expensive. A buddy of mine actually got a bunch of sealed copies of it when his wife used to work for PlayStation, but he's not going to give me one of those. Maybe one of these days, but yeah, the only time I've ever seen anyone playing it was, I think James and Mike Mondays did an episode on it, and it didn't look great. But it's just a PS4 Godzilla game. And that's kind of where us Godzilla fans had been around 2010, 2015 with Shin Godzilla, where it's very niche. And what's exciting now, piggybacking to Godzilla Minus One, is that I really see an opportunity for this to bring in a lot of fans. So there's never been a better time to be a Godzilla fan. Go support this movie. That's all you get for this week, guys. Thank you for allowing me to talk about something that I really didn't expect to do, but I loved it. And if you're going to check out any of these games, check out Destroy All Monsters Melee. Phenomenal game. Anyways, that's it for this week, guys. As a reminder, I release a video every Tuesday. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. We are, like I said, we are so close to 2,000. I don't know if we'll get it this year. Got a few weeks left, but the growth this year has been phenomenal, and I can't thank you guys enough. I can't say it enough. Thank you so much. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for watching the back catalog. And hey, let's keep rolling on. And we got a couple more weeks left here. We'll probably end the year out with a talking about 2023 releases. Maybe I'll do a tier list with the games I've beaten, and we'll go from there. So yeah, as a reminder, new video every Tuesday. It's been so nice getting a hold of you. Take care.